Bernie Sanders once remarked, "If the environment were a bank, it would have been saved by now." Think about this for a moment and how many too-big-to-fail banks were bailed out in response to the financial crisis, but we are on track to climate destruction. Now, I am not your typical teenager. For some context, I went to my first protest at the age of 12 about government corruption, and during the summer, I spent it doing an online course by Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman. I have always held an inner passion for justice and equality. My political idols include, among many others, Jacinda Ardern, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Bernie Sanders. As a middle school student, I often hear the question, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" But these 10 words are problematic. I want to be in a world where everyone pays their fair share of taxes, where those in poverty are uplifted and have a decent standard of living, and where we avoid climate destruction. We are currently in a global pandemic where governments have had to adapt incredibly quickly to the economic and health crises. Today, I'll present my vision for a better world, combining past economic theory with measures currently implemented in response to COVID-19, and proposals being discussed in progressive circles. I'd like to begin with a short story. Last November, I came across a village outside the coal-dependent city of Datong in northern China. Some locals were building a pavilion at the entrance. We saw some houses that looked close to collapsing. We also came across multicolored cows, large piles of dark yellow corn, and local alcohol in courtyards. The smell of alcohol was noticeable as soon as you walked into any building. Reflecting on all this, I realized that this is what a stagnant economy looks like on a micro level. As a result, the local government funded a construction project in the form of the pavilion. The corn and alcohol were usually probably bought by tourists or exported, but because of COVID-19, these products remain unsold. I asked myself, what could be the economic solution to this real-life problem? So, as a 13-year-old politics and economics aficionado, here are my views on some key measures and proposals. Countries have implemented numerous fiscal policies to combat the ongoing recession, such as variations of job retention schemes. The UK implemented a furlough scheme in March 2020. This is paying 80% of the wages of around 9.5 million people. Similarly, EU countries such as Germany and France have implemented a short-time work scheme, which directly subsidizes hours that are not worked. A crucial feature of such schemes is that employees keep their contracts with employers, even if they are not working. To the question as to whether these programs effectively prevent surges in unemployment, we can look at Okun's law, which measures the correlation between economic activity and unemployment. During the financial crisis, this model accurately predicted a rise in unemployment. The difference between the actual increase in unemployment and the predicted increase is a measure of how successful these job retention schemes are. A study comparing predicted and actual unemployment rates in Germany, France, Spain, and Italy in the first 2 quarters of 2020 concluded that the job retention schemes in these countries were successful. For example, in Spain, the actual unemployment rate was only half the Okun's law predicted unemployment rate of 30% in the second quarter of 2020. Spain, in particular, has taken the spotlight in economic circles after implemented the world's largest real test of universal basic income. More commonly known as UBI, this is a progressive policy where people are given a monthly cash payment, regardless of employment status, to spend as they want. However, it is important to note that Spain's new policy, although similar, is not a direct comparison to UBI. Spain's guaranteed minimum income ensures that everyone earns at least 462 euros a month and targets around 2.3 million people. The payments go up to 1,015 euros a month, depending on the number of family members. It is estimated to cost about 3 billion euros a year. It is different to a minimum wage in that the government subsidizes whatever is not paid by employers up to the minimum income amount. This scheme is more of a welfare policy, however, it still stands to be a litmus test for UBI, which is more of an economic policy. A typical response to recessions by many politicians is to start new infrastructure projects. This creates new jobs, which A, reduces unemployment, and B, puts money back into the economy for the new disposable income created. This effect is commonly known as the Keynesian multiplier. However, some argue that these projects take time to implement and more efficient policies should be given priority. Amidst the ongoing economic shock, it is important that governments go beyond conventional fiscal stimulus and ensure the greatest possible impact on growth for every dollar spent. According to a 2009 report by the OECD, public investment has the largest multiplier, meaning it has a larger impact than tax cuts or direct relief to households. Knowing this, it is important for governments to spur sustainable growth within the limits of our Earth's resources to sectors which fuel a transition to net carbon zero emissions as soon as possible. This idea is known as donut economics, which is an idea put forward by Oxford economist Kate Raworth. Although a relatively new concept, most progressive policies fit within this framework. The donut economics concept shares many similarities as the circular economics theory, which states that there are limits to our Earth's resources, and we should work to maintain, reuse, and equitably share these resources. A key component of Keynesian economic theory is that although governments should run budget deficits in recessions, this should be accompanied by higher taxation in times of economic prosperity. A quick look at the status quo shows us that COVID-19 has exacerbated wealth inequality. The World Bank has warned that over 100 million people could be pushed into extreme poverty. Meanwhile, last year, the collective wealth of the world's billionaires rose $3.9 trillion to reach $11.95 trillion. The charity Oxfam has said that the 10 richest people, who are all men, by the way, have seen their net worth increase by $540 billion within that same period. The report concluded that $540 billion would be enough to prevent anyone from falling into poverty as a result of COVID-19 and pay for a vaccine for everyone on Earth. A policy that has been discussed by leading progressive politicians and parties across the globe is a wealth tax. For example, US Senator Bernie Sanders, in his 2020 presidential campaign, proposed an annual tax on extreme wealth for the top 0.1% of households, which would only apply to net worth of over $32 million. It would raise around $4.35 trillion over the next decade and reduce the wealth of billionaires in half over 15 years. This plan would not only drastically reduce wealth inequality, but also aid in crucially reallocating money to new public investments in sectors crucial to achieving net zero carbon emissions. Another progressive proposal supported by Senator Sanders is a job guarantee. Viewed as radical by some mainstream economists, this idea is not entirely new. In 1944, Franklin D. Roosevelt, widely viewed as a protagonist in getting the world out of the Great Depression with his New Deal policies, called for a right to employment. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. also demanded employment for everyone in need for a job. A jobs guarantee would create a full employment economy where anyone who is unemployed is offered a fixed-wage job in the public sector, regardless of experience or technical abilities. A job guarantee not only reduces poverty, but on a macroeconomic level, it also acts as an automatic stabilizer. It keeps inflation steady as the economy fluctuates. This policy would have to be enacted carefully so that the wage offered by the state effectively becomes the new minimum wage. This way, there is still an incentive for people to find employment in the private sector. The jobs offered in the public sector should be productive jobs, maybe even in new industries like renewable energy and sustainable infrastructure. We are facing not only a public health emergency with COVID-19, but also an economic and climate emergency. Millions of people are falling into poverty, while the wealth of billionaires soars. These are fundamental issues which impact everyone, but it is my generation that will have to tackle and face these challenges head on. I can't vote for another 5 years, and neither can my friends. But my family, teachers, and politicians can invite more of us into their conversations about how we envisage our world. So, before you ask us the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Ask us what kind of world we want to live in. We need everyone, adults and children, in this fight for a better future. And the only way to do that is together. Thank you.